lying on our backs. So bend your knees and use your hands to come down onto your back. We're going to keep the knees bent to begin with. So separate the feet about mat distance apart and allow the knees to drop in towards each other so that they're fully supported. And you can adjust where your feet are so that you feel comfortable, where you're not using any musculature. And then adjust so that your shoulder blades are resting flat on the floor and your hips are resting flat on the floor. And just take a moment to kind of feel your body. And noticing where you feel tension, gripping. And just bring your awareness into those spaces and allow them to settle. See if you can allow some relaxation as you come into the space of your breath. And start to notice your breath and where you feel the breath prominently in your torso. So notice if you feel it more in your belly, more in your chest, somewhere in between. And without the need to correct right away, just kind of notice where you normally breathe. So I'm going to introduce some cues that we'll return to again and again throughout the practice. So take your first finger of either hand and place it on the bottom of your chin on the face part, not the neck part. And use your finger to lightly press your chin towards your throat. And as you do that, feel the back of your neck lengthen. So you'll hear me say, chin in, neck long. This creates a bit of space in the back of your neck. And keep the chin there. Bring your hands to your collarbones. Just allow the collarbones to spread, opening the front of the chest, not from drawing the shoulder blades together, but more from a widening, almost as if you were creating a smile with your collarbones. So collarbones wide, and bring your hands to rest on the bottom of your rib cage. So the part of your rib cage that separates the lower or the belly from the rib cage, and allow the fingertips to point in towards each other and the heels of the hands to rest on the side of your rib cage. And first notice if you feel any movement of your breath moving out towards the heels of your hands. Or notice if you feel more of the movement kind of flaring the ribs forward. So the next cue is ribs down and in. So taking the front of the ribs and kind of tilting them towards your pelvis and allowing the breath then to move into the heels of your hands. So you feel the expansion of the rib cage out. So the diaphragm is expanding down, it's contracting down towards the belly. This creates intra-abdominal pressure, and we're going to use this a lot today. So as you inhale, feel the ribs expand out towards the heels of your hands. And as you exhale, feel the heels of, or the ribs peel away from the heels of your hands lightly. So whenever we're on our lower back, we have a slight space where the lower back lifts off the floor. Keeps the spine in neutral. So instead of pressing the spine towards the floor, have a slight space in the lower back. Keep your thumbs on your lower ribs and take your pinky fingers and place them on the hip points, those bony points at the front of your hips. And almost as if you're drawing them in towards each other. So this keeps the pelvis in neutral, side to side and front to back. And it keeps the ribs, the front of the ribs down. So neck is long, collarbones wide, front of the ribs down and in, pelvis in neutral, low back off the floor. Start to walk the feet in so your heels are in line with your sit bones. Inhale, expanding the ribs out to the sides. Lift your right leg, foot off the floor, taking your knee directly above your hip. Pause here and take a few breaths. Each inhalation expanding the rib cage out. So we're creating that intra-abdominal pressure to create core support. Notice if the lower back presses down, keep that light lift of the lower back off the floor. And bring the right foot back down. Inhale, expand the bottom of the rib cage out. Lift, left foot off the ground, knee above the hip, shin parallel to the floor. So the pelvis stays still, the ribs stay down and in, neck long, collarbones wide. Take a few breaths here. In and out through the nose. Inhale, expand the bottom of the rib cage. And as you exhale, slowly lower the leg back down to the floor. So both feet on the floor, heels in line with your sit bones. Take your hands beside your hips, palms down. Snuggle your shoulder blades a little closer to your spine, so not over exaggerating it. Press through the inner edge of your feet. Inhale, expand the rib cage out. Press down through your feet. And as you exhale, slowly lift your hips off the floor. So coming into a bridge pose. Inhale, expand the rib cage out. Squeeze the glutes, lift the hips a little higher. So we're using the glute muscles to find that hip extension. Inhale, expand the rib cage out. As you exhale, slowly lower the hips to the floor. Hug your right knee in towards your chest. You can either keep your left foot on the ground or you can extend the leg long to the ground. Notice if your right hip lifts up towards your rib cage, and take your right thumb, place it in your hip crease and kind of pull the hip crease down as you draw the knee in closer to yourself. Check your cues, neck long, collarbones wide, lower ribs in, slight lift of the lower back off the floor. Just notice the crease in your hip. So you're creating that hip flexion with the leg bone and the hip socket. So you can feel the top of the leg bone kind of rolling to the bottom of your pelvis near your sit bones. Keep your right hand on your knee. Take your lower or your left hand and place it on your lower belly, just so that you can feel lower ribs staying in, hips staying in neutral. And use your right hand to kind of draw circles with your leg bone and the hip socket. And as you go in one direction, first of all, notice, minimize the movement of the pelvis. See if you can just create that movement with the leg bone kind of stirring in the hip socket. And then switch directions. Notice where you feel ease of movement and notice where you feel less movement. And just acknowledge that. Come back to center. Inhale, expand your ribs. As you exhale, slide your left foot so it's back on the ground. And then take your hands and place them behind your thigh. We're going to start to rock on the spine. So draw your chin towards your throat to lift your head off the floor. Tilt your left knee out and your left heel towards your right sit bone and just start to rock a little forward and back. Slowly gaining momentum so you can rock all the way up. Take your left sit bone and place it near your right sit bone. Take your right arm and place it behind your thigh. So you're kind of using it as a prop, and it depends on the flexibility of your hip, but you can grab your hand with your left hand, or you can grab your wrist and take it closer. If that doesn't work, you can just hold either side of your knee. We're using it to keep the knee in neutral. Rock forward onto your sit bones. Move your foot, the sole of your foot out to the right. Notice if your knee moves and try to keep it in neutral. So taking the foot out to the right. And then take it in so that the bottom of your foot faces the left. So trying to create as much mobility in your ankle. Take it out again. Foot turns to the right. Point the pinky edge of your foot towards your head and pressing the ball mount of your big toe away from you. Make sure the knee's not moving. And then start to draw circles with your ankle. And going slow enough that you're taking it into as much of that rotation as you can. The knee stays still. You're feeling more of the bones in the lower leg move and the footwork. And then draw in the opposite direction, almost as if you're moving it through molasses. So it's going really slow, so you get more of that movement. Release. Release the arm. Take the foot to the floor. Hands to the floor. Press up. If you can sit on your left heel, do so. Otherwise, you can just stay where it is. But bring the foot to the floor. So getting a nice stretch in the front of the ankle of the foot that's on the floor. Bring the right heel as close to your sit bone as you can. So creating that deep hip flexion. You can take your thumb, place it in the hip crease again. Take your left hand and place it on your knee. And push the knee forward as you pull the hip crease down. Sit bone is moving towards the floor. So we will have a little bit of a lift in the right hip, but try to take it down as much as you can. Push the knee forward. So creating more of that Dorsi flexion in the ankle. And then bring both hands to the floor. Shift the left knee forward. Hands to the floor. Bring your left foot beside your right foot. Heels are about hip distance apart. So fingertips on the floor. Bend the knees forward, tracking the second and third toe as you push the hip creases back. So we found the hip crease. Bring your fingertips into your hip creases. Push the hip creases back as you reach the head forward, chin towards your throat, collarbones wide, ribs peel off your thighs. Inhale. As you exhale, press down through your feet and stand up. So feet stay hip distance apart. Outer edges of your feet parallel, hands to your hips. Find that same, so we're gonna tuck the chin a lot because we're gonna look down at our feet, but ribs in, hips in neutral. Keep your toes on the ground, keep your knuckles on the ground, and then lift your big toe off the ground. So the big toe knuckles stay on the ground, but the toes lift off. Notice what starts to happen in your legs. Press down through the big toe knuckles, toes stay lift, and as if you're trying to tear your mat apart. Push your feet apart, feel it in your hips. Keep that, lift your head, chin in, ribs in, pelvis in neutral. Keep pushing the big toe mat down and pull the mat apart with your feet and your heels. Notice the outer hips engage, and then release the big toe mats down. Bring your fingertips into your hip creases. Push the hip creases back as you bend the knees straight forward. Take your hands to the outside of your knees. You're going to push your hands into your knees, and with the same force, push your knees out into your hands. Really hinge the hips, so push the hip creases back. Peel your lower belly off your thighs. Lower ribs in, chin tucked, collarbones wide. Notice the feeling that you get on your outer hips. Keep that, bring your arms by your ears. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, fold forward as you move towards straightening your legs, and you may or may not straighten your legs. Bend opposite knees. So just kind of let that go by bending one knee, moving towards straight with the opposite knee. Bend both knees forward. As you come onto your toes, bend your knees deeper, and then come back onto your back. Coming back to where we started. Chin tuck, neck long, collarbones wide, lower ribs in, lower back off the floor. Feet hip distance apart, hands beside the hips. Press the inner edges of your feet down. Inhale, expand your ribs. So find that gut pressure. As you exhale, slowly lift the hips off the floor. So coming back into bridge pose. Squeeze the glutes, lift a little higher. Inhale, expand the ribs. As you exhale, slowly lower the hips to the ground, keeping that awareness of gut pressure. Bend your left knee in towards your chest, wrapping your fingers around your shin, and then either keep that right leg straight or bent. Notice where the hips are. Cues, chin in, ribs in, lower back off the floor. Keep your left hand on your knee, right hand on your lower belly. Use it as a guide to keep your cues in line as you start to make circles with your knee in one direction. Minimize the amount of rock you feel in your hips. Notice where the leg bone rotates inside the hip socket. Switch directions. Notice where it moves with ease and where it kind of catches, and just make a note of that. Come back to center. Bend your right knee if it's not already bent. Wrap your fingers behind your left thigh and then lift your right foot off the ground. Heel comes towards the left sit bone, knee turns out, and start to, again, tuck the chin to lift the head and then rock. Rock several times, creating that momentum to come all the way up. And then right heel towards left sit bone, left arm comes behind the thigh, bringing your knee as close to your chest as you can comfortably. So feeling that same, the leg bone and the hip socket either grabbing the hand or maybe the forearm. So going as close to your chest as you can. Start to turn the bottom of your left foot to face the left. You'll notice the muscles on the front of the shin engaged. These tend to be really weak, so you might get some cramping, but we actually need those muscles to work. Then turn the bottom of the foot in. You might feel some muscles on the inside of your calf engage. Turn it out again. Dorsiflexion is really important for knee mobility as well as hip mobility. Turn it in again. And then start to draw circles in one direction as if you're moving through molasses, really trying to find the sole of the foot, moving as much in a direction as you can, and then move it in the other direction. Good. Bring the foot down to the ground. You could either keep the heel or the foot on the floor or lift up and sit on your right heel. So the knees facing slightly out. Take your left thumb, place it in your hip crease and push the hip crease towards the floor. You'll feel the sit bone move down. Right hand on your knee, push your right knee forward. So taking your ankle as far into Dorsi flexion as you can. So you're kind of using the weight of your body to push your knee forward. Really pulling the sit bone down so you can keep as much of that neutral pelvis as you can. And bring your hands on either side of your left foot. Bring your right knee forward. Press down through your left foot to bring your right foot to the floor. So you're coming into a low kind of crouch. Separate your feet hip distance apart. Bring your hands to the outside of your knees. Push your hips back. So really deepen the hip crease. Start to peel your lower belly off the floor. So cues, neck long, ribs in, pelvis in neutral. From here, press down as you press your knees out to lift all the way up. Feet parallel, hip distance apart. This time, keep your knuckles down, keep your big toe on the floor, and lift all the other toes off the floor. Last time we pushed out, this time, as if you're trying to squeeze your mat together. So push the inner edges of your foot together without moving your feet. You'll feel this kind of translate up into your inner thigh. Notice what happens to your toes. Like my left toes want to curl. See if you can spread them as you continue to press your feet in. Let that go. So work on our feet is also good. Fingertips into your hip creases. Push your hip creases back as you hinge. So belly's moving out over your thighs. This time, cross your wrists and bring your hands to the insides of your knees. Push your hands out as you push your knees in. Feel the inner thighs. See if you can feel the outer hips pull back at the same time to hinge a little deeper. Keep your hands here and start to straighten your knees slightly, tilting your chest forward, chin in, and then hinge, lift your chest. So start to straighten your knees as your spine goes parallel to the floor. Your knees probably won't straighten fully, but just see if you can feel that hip hinge with the musculature of the legs involved. Lower the hips. Let go of the legs. See if you can maintain the strength in the legs. Inhale, expand the ribs out. Arms up beside your ears. As you exhale, fold. So just that hinge to bring your hands to the floor. Knees straight or bent. Inhale, draw the chin towards your throat as you lift up slightly. Hands to the floor, knees bend. Lift your heels off the floor as you bend your knees and lower the hips towards the ground. And roll back onto your back. Heels in line with your sit bones. Hands beside the hips. Check your cues. Chin in, neck long, collarbones wide. Lower ribs in, lower back off the floor. Inhale, expand your rib cage. As you exhale, press down through your feet. Lift your hips. Use your glutes to lift your hips higher. Inhale, expand. Exhale, slowly lower your hips towards the ground. Inhale, lift your right knee above your hip and then straighten your right leg. Feel the leg bone deep in the hip socket. Keep your right leg there, bend your left knee, knee above your hip socket, and then straighten your left leg. So both legs above your hips. Lower back is still off the floor. Lower ribs down and in. Expand your rib cage. Keep your right leg where it is. Lower your left leg. Hover it, only going as far as you can, and keep the ribs on the front of your body. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, lift your right leg. Inhale, expand. Make sure everything in the torso stays stable. Exhale, lower your left leg only as far as you can keep the engagement of your core. All the cues. Inhale, expand. Exhale, lift your left leg. Inhale, expand, bend your knees. Take your left heel towards your right sit bone, left knee out. Grab behind your right thigh. Draw your chin towards your throat as you lift your head. Start to rock forward and back. Rock all the way up. Your hands to the floor and lift up into that position where you're sitting on your heel, knees on the floor, or foot's on the floor. Hands to the floor. Press down to bring your left foot to the ground. Finding that hip hinge, so send the hip creases back, peel the belly off your thigh. You're still low. Take your left hand, place it on your left shin. Press down through your right foot. Inhale, expand your ribs. And as you exhale, press down through your foot. Lift up. If you can, bring your right knee up with you. So you're balancing, or left knee up with you. So you're balancing on your right foot. Notice if that right hip is up or left hip is up. Draw the hip crease down. So check your cues. Left hand continues to hold the left knee, but take it to the outside or the inside of your knee. So press knee together. You can always be on your foot just to check balance. But if you are balancing, turn the bottom of your foot in as you take the shin in. Keep pressing hand and knee together. Keep it there and take the foot out. Bring it back to center. Hands to your hips. Start to bend your right knee as you shift your spine forward. Step your left foot back. So you're in a high lunge. Check your cues. Chin in, neck long. Collarbones wide, lower ribs in. Tilt the top of your pelvis up towards your ribs. Maintain that. Inhale, expand your ribs. As you exhale, slowly lower your left knee to the ground. So we're coming into a low lunge. Take your right hand, place it on your right knee, or left hand, place it inside your left knee. Take your right thumb, place it in the hip crease, so pull it down. So you're on your back knee, and you can use a blanket under your knee if you need to. So right thumb in the hip crease, start to press your inner knee into your left hand as you push your knee forward. So you're using the thumb to create that deep hip hinge, and you're using the hand resistance to create the opposing action. Inhale, shift up. Press your knee into your hand, thumb down, shift forward. So going deep into that hip hinge, as deep as you can comfortably. Notice your foot. Find the big toe mount and the pinky toe mount. Shift up. Rotate. Open towards the long side of your mat. So you're going to take your left foot behind you and square your chest to the long edge of your mat. Take your left hand behind your hip and bring it into your right hip crease. Take your right hand, back of the hand inside of the knee. So finding the hip hinge and external rotation. Bend the knee over the toes, push the knee out so it tracks your toes. Shift up, stay here. Take your hips towards your left heel as your chest move towards the floor. So now you're hip hinging forward. Inhale, lift up. Press knee out as you hip hinge out to the side. Press down through your foot. Inhale, come up. Inhale into your ribs. Set your hips back towards your heels as you fold the spine forward, hip hinging into your left hip crease. Inhale, come back up. Exhale, Hinge out to the side. Inhale, lift up. Exhale, send your hips back towards your left heel as you fold torso towards the floor. Inhale. Exhale, come up. Release your hand and rotate back to the front edge of your mat. Bring both hands to the floor on either side of your right foot. And then walk your right foot out. So it's to the outside of your hand. Bring both hands to the floor. Start to press your knee into your shoulder as you deepen your hip crease. So take the right sit bone towards the floor and slightly in towards your left thigh. Press down through your hands, lift your head and chest. So keep reaching hip crease down, hugging the outer right hip in so your sit bone slightly tilts towards your left thigh. Chest is open. Shift back so that the hips come back. Tuck your left toes under. Lift your left leg off the ground. Inhale, expand your rib cage. So find the gut pressure to step your right foot beside your left, coming into plank pose. Inhale, expand your ribs. Hip hinge to bring your knees down to the floor. And then slowly send your hips back towards your heels. Toes are tucked under. So we're getting a stretch in the bottom of our foot as we bring our head towards the floor, coming into child's pose with toes tucked under. So instead of toes tucked back. Inhale, expand the ribs. Lifting your lower belly off the thighs, lift your head. Press down through your hands. Press your heels back. Can you lift your knees off the floor? Down to the floor. Inhale, expand your ribs. Shift your hips forward as you come up onto your knees. So your toes are tucked, heels are back. So we've done a lot of hip hinging. We want to make sure we balance that out. Start to push your hips forward. So squeeze your glutes to push your hips forward. Expand your rib cage out, hands on your hips. Widen your ribs, lengthen your neck. Inhale again, expand your ribs. If you can, keep all this. Slowly lean back. A lot of core engagement, but also hip extension, and then come forward. Inhale, expand the ribs. Exhale, start to press the hips back towards your heels, moving really slowly. Bring the hands out in front of you as if you're coming down onto hands and knees, but use the core to do it slowly. And then finally bring hands to the floor. Keep your toes tucked. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, send the hips back towards your heels, lifting your knees off the floor, pressing the heels towards the floor as you hinge back into downward facing dog. So hands on the floor. Pause here in down dog. Bend your knees just a tad to see if you can tilt the hips forward a little bit to find more of the hinge. And then inhale, expand your rib cage. Look up between your hands. Bend your right knee, lift your right foot off the ground. So hip hinge, step the right foot forward. Press down through the ball mount of your right foot. Lift your left leg off the ground, hip hinge to step forward. Keep doing that to walk forward. Once you're all the way forward, bend your knees deeply, lowering your sit bones towards the ground, bringing the hands behind the back, and coming back onto your back. Heels in line with your sit bones, hands on the floor, find your cues. Long neck, wide collarbones, ribs in, lower back off the floor. Inhale, expand your ribs. Press down through your feet. Exhale, lift your hips. Inhale, expand your ribs. Squeeze your glutes. Exhale, slowly lower your hips towards the ground. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, lift both knees above your hips, and keeping that slight lower back, front of the core engaged. Straighten your legs as much as you can above your hips. Keep your right leg up. Inhale. Exhale, slowly lower your left leg as far as you can. Keep maintaining the cues. Inhale. Exhale, hinge to lift your leg back up. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, lower right leg, only as far as you can as you maintain your cues. Inhale, expand. Exhale, lower or lift. Bend both of your knees. Knees stay above your hips. Maintain your cues. Keep your left leg where it is. Bend your right knee, kicking the heel towards your left sit bone, knee out to the side. Grab behind your left thigh and start to rock, tucking the chin to keep the front of the core engaged. Finally, rocking all the way up, coming into that position that we're in before. So bring your hand to your knee, press your knee forward. You're on your right shin. Bring the hands to the floor, bring the left knee in, fingertips to the floor, press down through your left foot to bring your right foot up. Stay in that low lunge. Bring your right hand to the front of your right knee. Find your footing on your left foot from the hip hinge. Inhale, expand your ribs, pull your lower belly off your thigh. Press down to lift up, possibly balancing on your left foot. Notice if the right hip lifts. Find your cues, chin in, neck long, collarbones wide, lower ribs in, hips in neutral. Bring your right hand into the inside of your knee or the outside of your knee. Find resistance and just make your foot and your lower leg kind of like a grandfather clock. The whole thing moves. Release your hands to your hips. Slowly start to bend your left knee. Your whole body moves with your right hip crease as you step your right leg back into a high lunge. Find your cues, chin in, collarbones wide, ribs in, pelvis is in neutral. You can bring your hands to your hips kind of to check that. Hip hinge from your left hip crease in order to lower your right knee to the ground. Bring your left thumb into your hip crease. Let right hand inside of your left knee. Bending as deep as you can. So pull the hip crease towards the floor as you push the knee forward. You're kind of using the hand to guide your knee slightly out. Shift back forward. So there's this wild controversy that bringing your knee in front of your ankle joint is bad for you. That's false.
What?
Actually, they say never to let your knee go in front of your ankle joint. You should. Dorsi flexion is really important. So both of you, step your left foot back further, even further, so that when you bend, your knee goes way in front of your toes. We need dorsiflexion really badly.
What's
even more?
What's Dorsi?
Dorsiflexion is where the knee goes in front of the ankle joint.
Okay.
So watch. See how far I go in front? I mean, I know you're not going to be here, but it's okay to do that. Like, we need to do this. But the hip hinge helps to keep it in, like to actually use the knee. So one more time. Let the knee go as far as you can forward. Come up. We're going to take the right foot behind us as we face the long edge of the mat. Tuck your right toes under. Bring your right hand behind your hip and kind of just rest the fingertips as far either on the back of the hip, or if you can, wrap them into the hip crease. Back of the left hand comes inside of the knee. And then again, hip hinge. So letting the knee go as far forward of the ankle joint as you can. Shift up, hinge forward from your right hip crease, taking your hip towards your left heel or right heel. Inhale, come up. Hip hinge out to the left. The heel can come off the ground, that's fine. Lift back up. Send the hips back as you tilt forward. And up, spine parallel to the floor, chin is tucked. Inhale. Out to the side, this is the last time. Lift back up. Send the hips towards the right heel. Hinge from your right hip crease. Come back up. Release your hands as you rotate towards your left foot. Hands on either side of your left foot, and then walk your left hand inside of your left foot as you turn your left foot out slightly. Hands to the ground, toes can point back. Start to press your knee into your left shoulder. Draw your hip crease towards the floor as you sink deep into your front hip crease. Notice if your left hip starts to press out to the side, and aim your sit bone towards your right inner thigh. Press down through your hands, lift your head, lift your chest. Find the expansion in the sides of your rib cage as you inhale and bring the lower ribs in. Shift the hips slightly back. Tuck your right toe under. Lift the right knee off the ground. Firm the thigh, and then step left foot beside right. So staying in plank, expand your rib cage. As you exhale, bend the knees forward to bring them down to the floor. Toes stay tucked under. Press your hips towards your heels. So as if you're going into child's pose, but toes are tucked. So stretching the sole of the foot. Look up between your hands as you shift forward slightly. Press down through your hands as if you're sucking the leg bones into your hip sockets. Can you lift your knees off the floor? Lower the knees down. Keep your toes tucked. Inhale, expand your rib cage. So find the gut pressure to lift all the way up onto your knees. Hands to your hips. Find your cues. Inhale, expand your ribs. So find gut pressure. So find support to lean back. Squeeze the glutes as you lean back only as far as you can. You want to maintain the front of the core. Lift up. Send the hips back. Expand the ribs. Moving as slowly as you can to bring the hands back down to the floor. Keep the toes tucked under. Send the hips back towards the heels as you lift your knees and then press up into downward facing dog. Inhale, lift up onto your toes. Firm the front of your thighs, bend your knees. Press your leg bones back into the hip socket, so hip hinge. Move towards straightening your legs. Inhale, expand into the rib cage. Bend your knees. Keep the weight in your left foot, lift your right foot, take it as far forward as you can. Press into the right foot, lift the left foot. Hip hinge to bring your left foot forward. Continue this as you walk your feet up between your hands. Feet hip distance apart. Send the hip creases back as you lower your hips to the floor. As you get a little deeper, can you reach your hands out and then use your core to lower your hips to the floor? And that's a progression, maybe, maybe not. Feet still on the floor. Reach the hands forward. Find your gut pressure. So expand your ribs. And then as you exhale, slowly lower down one vertebrae at a time. We're gonna continue to move this, progress this. So just remember what we've been doing and opt for what you want to do. Hands to the floor. Bend your right knee towards your chest. Bring your fingers across your shin. Keep your left foot on the floor. Inhale, expand your ribs. As you exhale, press down through your left foot, lift your hips off the ground. So coming into bridge with the hip hinge in your right hip crease. Notice if your pelvis moves out of neutral. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, lower down. You might feel a nice little cramp in your hamstrings. That's a good thing. It means we're using them. Bring your hands behind your right thigh. Pick your left foot off the floor. Tilt the knee in, heel in, knee out, heel in. Rock. Rock up into that. Can you move into it using momentum? So coming into that little low crunch. You can use hands on the floor or maybe hands to heart. Tilt the knee forward. Press down through your right foot. Either use your hands or can you go from a crouch up into that balancing posture? It's fun, right? Hands to your hips. So standing on your right foot, notice if the left hip is up. Keep the hips in neutral. Take the whole knee out to the side. Hips don't move. Bring it in. Take it up. Bring it in. Balancing on your right foot. Keep your hands on your hips to keep that alignment in neutral. Start to bend the right knee forward as you hinge. And then straighten. Left leg back, maybe balancing on right foot. So we have that deep hip hinge in our right hip crease. So you might use your fingertips to push your hip crease back. Bend your right knee, step your left foot to the back of your mat. So you're back in that high lunge. Find your cues. Chin in, collarbones wide, ribs low, hips high. Keep the hips in neutral. You want to progress this, start to bend your left knee, making sure the hips stay in neutral. Take your right hand to your knee. You can do what we did the last time, or you can push your right knee forward as you slowly take your left knee to the ground. Point the toes back. Right hand on the thigh, hip crease pulls down and back as you shift forward. And then arms come over your head, arms beside your ears. Check your cues. Tuck your left toe under. Firm your left thigh. Lift left leg off the ground. And then come into warrior two. So opening to face the long edge of your mat. Drop your left heel down and in. Take your right thumb in your hip crease and roll the outer hip as you bend into your knees. Straighten your right leg. Left hand comes behind your hip into the hip crease. Use that to pull your hip back as again, you press your right knee out to the side. Do that a couple more times. Notice if you feel that awareness of your hip crease, bend, turn towards the front of your mat, lower your hands on either side of your right foot and bring your left heel on the ground. Left hand stays on the floor. Take your right hand to your right knee, push your knee forward as you press the right sit bone towards your left inner thigh. So hug the outer hip in. Keep your left hand on the ground. Start to rotate your belly towards your inner right thigh. Pull your belly away from your thigh. Keep pushing the inner knee out as you hug the outer hip in. Turn your head to look down at your right foot. Lower your hand to the ground. Step right foot beside left foot, so plank. Expand your ribs. Try to just bend your knees, so keeping the upper body strong, and then lower your knees to the floor. Toes stay on the ground, lean back. So finding child's pose with toes tucked. Inhale, expand your ribs. Find the pressure, lift up onto your knees. Toes stays tucked, start to push hips forward. So engage the glutes, expand the ribs. Hands can either stay at hips or maybe bring the arms out in front. Inhale. Exhale, lean back. Keep pressing the hips forward. Inhale. Exhale, forward. Hinge from the hips. Gut pressure lowers you all the way down. Hands to the floor. Sit the hips back as you lift the knees off the floor. So belly resting on your thighs. And then inhale, expand gut. Exhale, lift the hips. Downward facing dog. So we've been stepping up. What would happen if we hopped up? Inhale, expand your ribs. Toes, lift heels. Bend your knees, resting your belly on your thighs. Gaze between your thumbs. Inhale, expand your ribs. Press down through your feet, slight lift of your hips. Only hop as far forward as you can. So maybe you just hop just like a footprint. Come up onto your fingertips. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, press down and maybe hop even further forward. So between your hands. Lift up on your toes. So using core to balance, expand, arms out in front. Can you slowly lower down, either using hands or not? Either using your hands or lowering back using your core. One more side. Hands beside your hips. Weight to your left foot, bend your right knee in towards your chest. Or sorry, right foot on the ground, bend your left knee in towards your chest. Find your cues. Inhale, expand your ribs. Press down through your right foot, lift your hips off the ground. Inhale, expand your ribs. Exhale, lower down. Wrap your hands behind your left thigh. Take your right heel towards your left sit bone. Knee out, start to tuck your chin and roll. Using momentum to find yourself in this position again. Hands can either come to the floor or you can bring hands to your heart. Tilt your right knee so it's facing forward. Press down through your left foot. So you have to find Dorsi flexion in your ankle and that deep hip hinge. Press down, inhale, find gut pressure. So find core stability and use that to lift up. So balancing, you can always use your toe on the ground or use a wall. Hands on your hips, level off your hips. Find your cues, take your left knee out to the side, right knee out to the side, bring it in. So the rotation is in the hip socket rather than using the hips to open up more. Come forward, keep your hands on your hips as a reminder that they stay in neutral. Start to bend your left knee as you shift your torso towards the floor. Balancing on your left foot, can you stretch your right leg up behind you, balancing and straightening your left leg? Start to bend it. Step your foot to the back of your mat. So coming into a high lunge. Find your cues, chin in, collarbones wide, ribs in, hips up. Inhale, bring your arms over your head. You can do what we did the last time, or you can start to bend your right knee. kind of shin parallel to the floor. Push your left knee forward of your toes as you lower down onto the floor. We're coming into low lunge. Left thumb in your hip crease. Take your lunge as deep as you can. So really hug the outer hip in. You should feel some work in your outer hip. It should be somewhat fatiguing. Check your cues. Lift back up. Press down through your left foot. Hip crease stays down. Straighten your back leg to lift it off the ground, and then open up into warrior two. Take your right hand behind your hip, placing it on your outer left hip, and hip hinge here a couple of times. You can use your hand as kind of a guide to make sure knee goes forward of the second and third toe. Lift up. Start to turn towards the front of your mat. Coming onto your right toes, lower your right hand inside of your left foot. Hip crease down, outer hip in. Press down through your left hand, right hand, rotate belly towards your thigh, lifting left hand up towards the sky. Bring the right hand to the outside of your right foot. Step back, plank pose. Inhale, expand your ribs. Start to bend the knees, taking shins parallel to the floor. Lower them down, toes stay tucked. Press the hips back towards your heels. Lift up, hips above your knees. Hands either to your hips or forward. Squeeze the glutes, fill the ribs. Exhale, lean back. Inhale into your ribs. Exhale, come forward. Hands stay forward. Start to hinge the hips back as you lower slowly to the ground. Bend your hips towards your heels, lifting your knees off the floor, belly on your thighs. Straighten your legs, downward facing dog. So just notice what your down dog feels like after all that hinging. See if you can find the expansion of the ribs. Lower ribs are in. Lift up onto your toes. Bend your knees, so hip hinge, belly on your thighs, gaze between your thumbs. Press down through your hands. Inhale, lift your hips slightly, and maybe hop a footprint. Lift up onto your fingertips. Bend your knees, lift your hips slightly, and hop between your hands. Lower your hips to the floor, and slowly lower down onto the ground. Bring your arms out to the side. Step your feet wide, knees bent, and just gently windshield wiper your knees side to side. Let any tension in your spine go. Let any tension in your core go. Walk the feet back to center. Hug the knees towards your chest. Tuck your chin towards your throat. Gently rock side to side here. And when you are ready, extend your legs long to the ground, coming into Shavasana. Adjusting so that you feel an even amount of weight on your hips, your shoulder blades. Check your cues, chin in, neck long. Collarbones wide, lower ribs in. Front and back of the pelvis in neutral. Lower back slightly off the floor. Arms down beside your body, palm face up. Bring your awareness to your breath. Feeling the slight breeze of the breath as it passes in and out through your nostrils. Noticing again your natural tendency of where you breathe in your body. And see if you can bring that awareness into a light, low expansion of your lower ribs. Finding ease in both the inhale and the exhale. Not forcing it to get any bigger. In fact, maybe each breath becoming a little lighter. Maybe each breath becoming a little slower. Maybe each breath becoming a little longer. And slowly bend your knees. And roll yourself onto your side body. Resting here in a fetal position. So our first position of life is this fetal. Hip hinging is natural. Hip hinging is important. And although it may be frustrating to have found that we have lost some of that hip hinging, we can regain it, just as we learned in a natural way as we were born into this world and started to learn to mobilize in this world. We have the capacity, we have the ability to re-find these natural patterns that our body needs. It may take time, it may take practice, but this is movement that is natural and necessary for good mobilization and to feel good in our bodies. Using your hands and arms, slowly start to press yourself up into a seated position. And as you sit in this cross-legged position, just notice if you have any more ease of being able to find a nice long neutral spine. The hip hinge is what we use in this seated position. So can you find your sit bones and stack your shoulders above your hips? Find the cues, long neck, wide collarbones, ribs in, front and the back of the pelvis aligned. And bring your hands to rest in heart center, feeling as your hands connect, yourself meets self. As you exhale, bow into the space of your heart, acknowledging the space of yourself, self-discovery that we have witnessed today, our own practice, our personal journey. Thank you so much. The divine in me honors the divine in you. Namaste.